There are moments in life that stop you cold, not because they are loud or dramatic, but because they reveal something quietly devastating about the people you love most. For me, that moment arrived on a Tuesday evening at 6:47 p.m. when a text from my older brother Caleb landed on my phone just as I was walking out of our Palo Alto headquarters after a 16-hour day. The message was short, polite even, but what it said stripped something out of me that I am still learning to name. He and his fiancée had decided it would be better if I skipped their wedding. Less awkward for everyone, he wrote. His fiancée was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. I worked in tech, it just was not the same level. What Caleb did not know, what he had never bothered to find out, was that I was the founder and CEO of a $2.1 billion artificial intelligence company, with offices in 5 countries and 340 employees. My name is Sienna Parker. 6 years ago, I walked out of Stanford with a PhD in artificial intelligence and 2 co-founders who believed, the way only sleep-deprived researchers can believe, that we were going to change something fundamental about the world. We called our company Meridian Systems. The technology we built used natural language processing algorithms to make expert knowledge accessible in ways it had never been before, powering diagnostic tools for hospitals, research platforms for legal firms, and educational systems that adapted in real time to individual learners. We had closed our Series D funding round 3 months before Caleb sent me that text. Forbes had called us the most innovative AI startup in Silicon Valley. The valuation sat at $2.1 billion. None of that had come easily, and none of it had ever mattered to my family, because none of them had ever asked. Caleb is 2 years older than me. He works as a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company in New York, earns good money, lives in a nice apartment in Brooklyn, and moves through the world with the easy confidence of someone who has always understood the social rules without having to study them. Growing up, he was the one people remembered in the room, athletic, socially fluent, effortlessly likable. I was the one buried in research papers, more comfortable with a compiler than a conversation. Our parents adored us both, but they understood Caleb in a way they never quite managed with me. When he graduated from college, they threw a party that filled the backyard. When I defended my doctoral dissertation, they missed it entirely, because it conflicted with a company retreat where Caleb was receiving an award for marketing excellence. I had learned a long time ago not to expect the scales to balance, but being quietly removed from my brother's wedding because I was not impressive enough, that was something new. Caleb's fiancée was a woman named Rosalind Vance. She wrote investigative journalism for the New York Times and had won a Pulitzer Prize the previous year for a landmark series on housing discrimination. I had met her exactly twice. Once at their engagement party, where she was charming but distracted, stepping outside repeatedly to take calls from her editor. Once at a family dinner where she spent a significant portion of the meal fact-checking sources on her phone. Both times Caleb introduced me with the same flat description. "This is my little sister Sienna, she works in tech." That was the whole sentence. No follow-up, no curiosity, just a category and a pivot back to whatever he had been saying before. The truth is I had never corrected him, not directly, not firmly. When Meridian Systems was new, I had told the family I was working on a startup. When we landed our first major client, I mentioned that things were going well. When we raised our Series A, I said we had gotten some funding. But Caleb had never asked what the company did, what my role was, what we were building, or why it mattered. After enough years of explaining yourself to people who respond with polite vacancy, you stop. You learn to protect your energy. I told myself it did not bother me, but I had been telling myself that for so long I had forgotten to check whether it was still true. I typed back a reply to his text. Understood. Congratulations on the wedding, nothing more. He did not respond. The Forbes interview had been scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I did not know until the Monday afternoon before, when my assistant Keely forwarded me the confirmation email, that the journalist assigned to conduct it was Rosalind Vance. I sat at my desk reading the email twice. Keely appeared in my doorway, smiling, telling me this was going to be huge for the company, that Rosalind was one of the best in the business. I nodded and said something agreeable. What I was actually thinking was that I could cancel. I could reschedule, cite a conflict, let my PR team handle it. Something kept me from doing that. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was something quieter and more stubborn, the part of me that was tired of being invisible, tired of shrinking so other people could feel comfortable. I left the interview on the calendar. Tuesday morning was cold and bright. I dressed deliberately. Tailored black pants, a structured blazer, a silk blouse, the Stanford PhD ring I wear on my right hand, simple diamond studs my grandmother left me. I looked like what I was. At 9:58 a.m., Keely escorted Rosalind to our third-floor conference room. Through the glass walls, I watched her arrange her recording equipment, review her notes, check her phone. She was polished in a way that read immediately as serious, expensive bag, designer dress, the composed posture of someone accustomed to being in rooms where things mattered. I thought about Caleb's text. His fiancée was too important to share a wedding with someone who worked in tech. At exactly 10, I walked in. Rosalind looked up with a professional smile already in place. She began introducing herself, and stopped mid-sentence. The smile dissolved. Her eyes went wide, and stayed wide for several seconds as she looked at me, then at her notes, then back at me. "Sienna," she finally said. "What are you?" She paused again. "I am here to interview Sienna Parker, CEO of Meridian Systems. That is me. But you are Caleb's sister. Caleb's sister who works in tech." "Yes," I said. I never said tech support. That was the version Caleb arrived at on his own. She sat down slowly, her composure genuinely fractured. Her notes were in her lap, but she was not looking at them. The bio her producers had sent her listed my Stanford doctorate, the 12 papers I had published before my 25th birthday, my 17 patents, the MIT Technology Review recognition, the company's valuation. She read pieces of it aloud as though processing them in real time. I told her we were at 18 patents now, that one had just cleared approval the previous week. She stared at me and asked whether Caleb knew I had been uninvited from the wedding. When she mentioned it, I told her about his text. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she told me Caleb had said something different entirely. He had told her I could not attend because of work conflicts, that I was shy around his professional friends, that I preferred to keep to myself and would find the environment uncomfortable. She had believed him because it matched what she thought she knew about me, the quiet little sister who worked somewhere in tech. She said she did not know, and the way she said it made clear she meant it. Then she put her head in her hands and said things about Caleb that I will not repeat in full, but that revealed she was genuinely furious. The kind of fury that comes from suddenly seeing a pattern you had been too close to recognize. I told her we should do the interview. She hesitated, then picked up her pen, and for the next 90 minutes she was completely and professionally extraordinary. She asked about Meridian's technology, about the challenge of raising venture capital as a young woman, about how I had built a world-class engineering team, about our medical diagnostic tool and what it meant for patients in under-resourced hospitals. She asked about my vision for AI in education, about the ethical weight of automating decisions that affect people's lives. I relaxed into it the way I always relax when I am talking about work, because the work is where I am fully myself, where my thoughts have room to move without apology. Emma was good at her job in a way that was obvious and admirable. She knew when to push and when to be quiet. At 11:30 she turned off her recorder, looked at me with something that seemed close to awe, and told me that what I was building could change how people interact with knowledge. Then she asked why I had never told Caleb or my family what I was actually doing. I told her the truth. I had told them, repeatedly, for 6 years. They had just never listened. She left with her equipment and her notes and, I suspected, a conversation she needed to have before she could do anything else. I sat in the conference room for a while after she was gone, watching the afternoon light move across the Palo Alto skyline. Keely knocked to ask about a board meeting scheduled for the next morning. Life continued. At 3:47 p.m. Caleb called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was confused and slightly panicked, saying Rosalind was furious, that she had told him I ran some billion-dollar company, that it could not be right, that she must have misunderstood something. He called again at 4:15 and at 5:30. At 6 he sent a text asking what had happened at the interview, and telling me Rosalind was saying the wedding was off. I did not respond until he texted, asking what Meridian Systems even was. That question, after 6 years, after every conversation I had tried to have, felt like a sentence I had been carrying for a long time finally setting itself down on the table between us. I told him it was the company I had founded, the one Rosalind had just interviewed me about for Forbes. He said he had not known I ran a company. I told him I had been telling him since 2018. Then I turned off my phone. The Forbes article ran the following Monday, with the headline, "At 29, Sienna Parker built an AI empire that is changing healthcare forever." Rosalind had written something that was not just a profile, but a portrait, capturing not only the technical achievements, but the animating idea behind Meridian, the belief that expert knowledge should not be a luxury available only to people who can afford the right doctors or lawyers or educators. By Tuesday morning, we had received over 140 media requests. My phone, back on since Monday night, held 23 missed calls from Caleb, and a chain of texts that moved from confusion to anger, to something that looked, by the final message sent at 2:47 in the morning, like genuine grief. He said he had read the article. He said he was sorry. He said he had no idea. I believed all 3 sentences, and was uncertain what any of them were worth. I called him Tuesday afternoon during a break between meetings. He answered on the first ring. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. He admitted he had needed me to be smaller than him, that my achievements had felt like a threat, rather than something to celebrate, that he had been raised with a picture of success that looked like his life and not like mine, and that he had unconsciously edited out everything I told him because it did not fit the story he was telling himself about who the accomplished one was. That was the most honest thing he had said to me in years, possibly ever. I told him that sorry was a beginning, not a resolution. That what I needed from him was not guilt, but sustained, genuine attention. Not asking about my company because he felt bad, but actually caring about the answer. I told him I would think about whether to have dinner with him. I hung up before he could say anything else. Rosalind called 3 days after that. She told me the engagement was permanently off. She had spent 2 days reviewing Caleb's social media, going through the patterns in the way he talked about people, recognizing something she had been too close to see clearly. He posted constantly about his own career milestones. He had never once mentioned me, not a single post, not a single reference to having a sister who worked in technology, let alone one who was building something significant. She said she could not build a life with someone who did not see the women around him clearly. I told her I understood. I told her she was good at her job. She said she had written the Forbes piece trying to help people see me the way she had seen me in that conference room, not as a footnote in someone else's narrative, but as someone doing remarkable work in the world. 3 months after the Forbes piece, Rosalind called again to ask whether I would participate in a longer feature for the Times about women in tech, specifically about achievement that goes unrecognized because it does not match expected narratives. I said yes. The piece anchored my story at the center and drew on dozens of interviews with women across the industry who had experienced versions of the same invisibility. The response was unlike anything I had anticipated. Hundreds of emails arrived from women who had built extraordinary things and still felt like afterthoughts in their own families, from daughters whose parents had not understood their work, from sisters overshadowed by brothers who assumed competence came in only one shape. I responded to as many as I could. One email in my inbox stood out from all the rest. It was from Caleb. The subject line said, "I read the article." He wrote that seeing our story in print from my perspective had clarified for him the actual scale of what he had done, not just the wedding text, but 6 years of chosen inattention. He was in therapy, twice a week. He said he was not fixed but he was trying, and that he wanted to know who I actually was, not because Forbes had told him to care, but because I was his sister and it was long past time. I read the email 3 times before I called him. He answered immediately, surprised I was calling. I told him I had read his message, that I appreciated its honesty, and that he could come to the company celebration we were hosting the following month. 500 employees, the milestone of our expansion, a gathering of the people who had built Meridian together. I told him he could come as my brother who was trying to learn, not as someone who already understood. He said he would take it. He brought a notebook. He asked Raj, my CTO, real questions about the technology. He stayed quiet more than he spoke. He found me near the end of the evening and said the word brilliant in a way that made me realize he finally knew what it meant when applied to me. Not as a compliment meant to make me feel good, but as an accurate description of something he had actually witnessed. I told him I had always been brilliant. He said he knew that now. I told him that was a start. That night, after the last guests had gone, I stood in my office, looking out at the Stanford campus glowing in the distance. I had built a $2.1 billion company. I had saved lives, I believed genuinely, with technology developed in that building by people who cared about the same things I cared about. I had been recognized by Forbes and the Times and the broader industry in ways that once would have felt like the whole goal. But what settled into me that evening was something quieter and more fundamental. It was the feeling of being seen, not by publications or investors or peers, but by the people who should have been looking all along, even imperfectly, even late. My phone buzzed. Caleb, thank you for letting me come tonight. I am not going to waste this. See you at Sunday dinner. I will tell Mom and Dad about your work properly this time. I typed back. They will not understand half of it. He responded almost immediately. Then I will help them understand. That is what family does. I set the phone down and looked back out at the lights. That is what family does, I thought, when they finally decide to show up. Not perfectly, not without years of catching up, but present, and paying attention, and trying. For now, that was enough. For now, it was more than I had dared to expect.